Hello and welcome back. And that is right, today we're returning to the subject of KVMs. Whether it is you're a light tech head or a full-on multi-site system admin, I think we can all agree that a decent little KVM device that you can access remotely to kind of oversee it, offer support, or just simply to just click a file from afar has never been more desirable in 2025. And Gl.iNet has been expanding its portfolio of PoE devices in 2025 and in late 2024. And one of their earliest devices was the original Comet device. It was a Comet KVM. It arrived, I think, at just sub $100 at the time, and it allowed users either utilizing their own remote access protocols or on the local area network to control another device, just like a remote streaming KVM device should. However, it wasn't the best. The storage arriving with 8 gig of internal storage there that only hit around 8 or 9 megabytes per second performance, and just generally the lack of things like power over Ethernet, which these days is in heavy demand, resulted in the brand going back to the drawing board and thinking again. Now, before we talk about the new PoE version of the Comet, it is worth highlighting that several times in the video I am going to talk about this. This is the Comet Pro, currently going through crowdfunding. This is kind of, for me, one of the most perfect KVM devices I've ever used, and I've used plenty there in the background of my life. This arriving with no PoE support, unfortunately, which is one of its area of criticism. It has more storage, has a higher performance, a better internal hardware there. It has Wi-Fi connectivity as well as network connectivity, and a display there, a passcode entry system, two-factor authentication, the works. However, this is going through crowdfunding, which ain't for everyone, is it? We've done a whole review. You can check that out. It'll be linked below. I recommend you check that out. But this video is about this one, the new Comet PoE. This changes a lot of the dimensions in terms of the ports and connectivity, upgrades the internal hardware in several different ways, and is promising to be a much better version of what the Comet was originally supposed to be. But are we going to pay more for this? Is it the same? Well, now the pricing of the Comet PoE has gone up since that of the original Comet there. Now currently available at around $109 there. And again, if you multi-buy, there are savings to be made there. And if you compare that against the original Comet, which is still available to buy, that sits at around $89, again with the original multi-buy offer. But there has been design changes that we'll talk about throughout the course of this video. But still nonetheless, that pricing there is most certainly an increase. So don't think you're just getting the same Comet with extra features. You are paying a little bit extra of around $20 in order to get hold of that. But it is worth reminding you that if on the Kickstarter page right now, they have enabled backer tiers to allow you to get access to things like this, where you can take advantage of the PoE model a little cheaper, as low as $94. So if you haven't already purchased the Comet, but you were mostly thinking about it, I would still recommend maybe going down this route, but it is still an add-on section there within the larger Kickstarter. And as I've mentioned several times in this video, and no doubt even more, neither of these devices for me are just as good as that of the Comet Pro. I just think this device has got more going on for it, although it lacks the PoE, which again they are adding, by the way, as an additional purchased extra. If you are going for that option, I would say this is still a serviceable, better option, at least in terms of price point, compared to the Comet PoE and the original Comet there. But still, let's crack on with this review for those of you that weren't really interested in that variation and are quite happy with this much more subtle and much more background utilized PoE KVM device. Now, regardless of how or where you purchase this device, it arrives with pretty much all the accessories you're going to need. USB Type-C to C, USB Type-A to C. It arrives with a network cable there, a fairly standard Cat5e. It arrives with an HDMI cable there included, and first-time setup instructions and manual. That's really it. There are optional accessories such as the ATX power board that you can get, as well as something I'll feature later on in the video, the Fingerbot. This allows you, with the connected USB dongle via Bluetooth, allows you not only to, when you're accessing this remotely, connect to this, but also this, press the power button on your local system. And I'll do a demonstration of that later on just to show you. But this has no fans, but it does have a full metal external there for heat dissipation. Along the side, they have moved some of the ports and connections compared with the original Comet device there. So it is worth highlighting. I think they could stand to be a lot louder about this, by the way, on a lot of their documentation, that although this does have PoE, and we'll talk about power consumption later on, it does still support traditional USB Type-C power input there. I saw power consumption of around 2.5 to 3.5 watts using a Unify switch, more on that later on. But one of the things that is missing from this is there's no HDMI in and out. That was something I really loved on this device because it allowed me to permanently place this between a client device and the network connectivity there and allow it to just sit there passively and not have to worry too much. This, unfortunately, when you connect this to a client system, this is going to have the HDMI input from that device, but nothing going out of it. So it really is an either or, whereas this allows you to have a standard everyday PC being used and simultaneously allow for remote access a lot more in a much more user-friendly fashion. It doesn't preclude that, but it does make it a little tougher. But it does arrive with a USB Type-C output there, and that allows you to connect it to the system that you're going to be controlling. The whole thing is conducted via USB. I don't quite know the protocol of that USB, I'll be honest, but this allows this system to either create a virtual keyboard and touchscreen utilization with a tablet, or just use that and your local client keyboard and mouse to control your system. And that USB 2 port there on the side does not allow for storage. It can only be used for that ATX board or utilizing this Bluetooth Fingerbot device down here. So overall, it's a very simplified device. They're not the only ones in the market to roll out KVM devices. Again, comparisons are available online, some bloody good ones for that matter, I might add. And ultimately, this is a much more passive, discrete variation of that of the Comet Pro that we talked about before, and we will be coming back to that in a few weeks. Overall, I think design-wise, I like it. It's quite sleek, it's quite understated. But let's go back to that subject of power consumption. Let's talk about temps as well. I've got the device here connected to a Unify PoE switch. There it is here on the right-hand side of the screen. I'm seeing around 3.4 to 3.5 watts, and that's while accessing the KVM device via the client tool, and that is using ultra high quality. If I lower that down, it will go down closer to 3 watts. Again, it will take a second or so for that to catch up. But interestingly enough, it actually drops down as low as 2.4 to 2.6 when you fully log out of the device. So there is definitely an element of utilization. Obviously, how much, we refresh that tab, how much of it is going to be utilized when you are perhaps using the graphical enhancement tools. So for example, if you are utilizing it for, some of the transcoding of stuff there, then there is a chance that you're going to see slightly different results overall. But I would argue in terms of power consumption, it's not too shabby at all. And for those of you that are interested in the thermals, because unlike the Comet Pro, which arrives in a plastic enclosure, this one's metal all the way around for dissipation. There isn't an active fan, so there's no noise. I would say the highest point of temperature was located around the rear near the ports. The ports sat at their peak at around 35.5 to 35.8 degrees there. On the sides, we saw not really anything. The sides sat at around 31 to 32 degrees, and the front there, which doesn't really have anything, there's no digital display or anything like that, it sat around 31 to 32 degrees overall, and that was after 8 hours of the KVM being intermittently accessed for my testing there. Overall, I'm happy with the temperatures. I don't think there's any need from what I'm seeing here of active cooling on the system, and the only thing, as I've mentioned several times in this video, is I'm kind of sad they didn't go for an HDMI in and out, so this could be used more passively alongside an existing system to pass through to the outside HDMI output, which makes this nowhere near as versatile as that of a Comet Pro, but still the versatility of PoE being utilized here and not really needing any kind of large external power brick, instead favoring PoE or USB power, all add up to still a rather versatile device. As mentioned earlier on, they haven't just slammed PoE on this and called it a day. They have added and upgraded a few different elements of the hardware architecture there. So alongside the base initial storage inside of 8 gigabytes being scaled up to 32 gigabytes, and its eMMC improved the performance there from 8 to 10 megabytes per second up to about 32 they say. More of that in the software section. But alongside that, the original ran with an ARM v7 CPU, the A7 processor, that had a clock speed of 0.8 gigahertz up to about 1.5 gigahertz per core there. It is hugely based on efficiency and low power, and alongside that it also arrived with 1 gig of DDR3 memory. Now, The PoE version scales things up. The CPU goes up to an A53 processor there, far more efficient, but more importantly can do more. It's got more, petrol in the tank, going from 1 gigahertz up to 2 gigahertz when needed. It's still 1 gig of memory, but it's DDR3L memory inside there, and that is an ARM v8 processor inside. So you just got more capabilities under the hood to get the job done. But ultimately, that matters for naught if the client software and the usability of it isn't very good. So let's crack on to a client tool, set up a remote access, and go through just what this system can and indeed cannot do. Right, so here we are on the desktop of my PC, but that's not quite true, is it there? Because what we're actually looking at here is that KVM software. Here, I'm accessing a Minisforum system running on the other side of the office over there. This is a Minisforum PC that's actually running 4 different VMs for me. And here on the background is my actual client machine. This just happens to be running a clone of this operating system from earlier, as you can tell on the bottom right where it says activate Windows. Now, again, I'm going to go through some of the bells and whistles on what this app can do, but I'm also going to highlight that you don't need to do it this way. If you don't want to use the client application, you can just go ahead and use your web browser if you like. All you need is the IP, which you can use the app to find. Now, it's that straightforward. It really is. But although you can access via the web browser, I am going to highlight that you for this video, we're just going to look mainly at that client application, what it can do, what it can't do, and ultimately what improvements there have been over previous versions of this software and indeed this hardware that we've seen before. Now, I'm running this on high. Obviously, on the highest there, I'm accessing it on the local area network, but you can use remote access services if you choose. But now I'm making a point of only utilizing local area network. I've got no internet connected services there. But if I chose to, I could have remotely accessed this. I could have enabled two-factor authentication very, very easily. It's already password protected. On top of that, if I chose to, I could have gone ahead and used Tailscale. Currently, that is the only VPN or tunnel VPN service that you can use on this. So it's either that or using their own. I kind of hope they add some more because it's looking a bit meager with that there at the moment, as long as other potential apps and services that you could use for the KVM in this open source software. On top of that, on the bottom right of the screen, we've got our controls of what we're accessing there with the KVM, mouse attachment and more. But you may also have noticed the microphone. That is right, you create a two-way communication with the PC that you're KVMing into. So whether this is a work client or whether this is a family member and you're doing troubleshooting, it's really handy to know that you have got the option of having microphone in and out if you need it there. I'm going to go ahead and mute that for now. And that is a service, by the way, that you can enable or disable at any time. As you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, all of the options are open to you for audio in and out. Now, talking about quality there, if we drop that down to the very lowest quality, it's worth remembering that not only can you lower the kind of bit rate quality that's coming through there if you're on a limited data connection, say remotely, but you can also change the graphical process there that's happening in the background. Again, thanks to that upgraded CPU they're running on here, that ARM v8 processor rather than the ARM v7 in the predecessor, as well as changing the orientation. Maybe you're using a tablet or another profile device, and changing the resolution output, which you can then change around remotely on the system. Again, there is different profiles there. It's a bit fixed. It is going to be very dependent on your setup there, but nonetheless, I'd rather have it than not. The same goes with having a virtual keyboard if you choose to. So if you're using a tablet device, you've got that option open to you. And again, all of these options are readily available here on the client, sorry, not the client, the web browser if you choose to. So again, but keep in mind, if you're doing the remote access there, using a web browser is a little bit more problematic. And as I understand it, I don't believe at the moment you can remote access the KVM device via the internet in just a web browser. I think you do need to use the client application there in order to do so. So again, I've got those two devices set up there and you can add them on the fly. Actually, on the subject of adding them on the fly, I'm just going to play this here. It actually took around 40 seconds. We scanned the device. I found the device, I added the device. It genuinely took around 40 seconds to add this fully and get access to the desktop. And that included, by the way, adding the password for the very first time. Obviously, I had to install the KVM client app. That took about a minute and a half. And I had to turn the device on. That took about a minute. But the actual software initialization and access only took 45 seconds. You can see it there at the bottom of the screen. If I fast forward through, again, that is a total there getting into the desktop of my remote access machine. I've got to give them credit for that. I'm really pleased with that. Now, you can enable things like mouse jiggling, which ensures that the screensaver won't kick in. You can also change some of the mouse modes there. So, you know, for example, if you're someone that doesn't, the whole two-finger mouse thing on a touchpad where up and down or inverted, you can change that on the local client, but also countermand what's on the local system. Same goes for the mouse mode as well, allowing you to go relative mode, and there are catch-up methodologies built in, because as you can see on the screen, there is a little bit of lag behind there because I'm using that lower access setup. If I go into the high quality one again, but again, it's still not perfect, but find me a KVM that has near or absolute perfect latency, either on the local area network, please. On the bottom left, we've then got the system identifier there. And again, a lot of this is really just about managing the system and the input that you are utilizing there to make it better tailored. And there's really the other stuff you'd expect, you know, dark light facilities there, time zone, languages. And then of course there is changing the network identity. Right now I've got it on dynamic, but if I wanted to for security, I could set it to a static IP there. Let's get rid of that virtual keyboard. And that's really it for the general background settings. And in the toolbox, this is one of the things I really love, because not only can you like get some text here, open up, for example, a notepad on that side there, and then paste that into the device with ease, but you can really go deep. So for example, here, I've created a few shortcuts, some of these by default, but if I wanted to get into the BIOS, for example, here, it will allow me, I've created a shortcut here that has F2, delete, F12, F7, which means when I boot the device, I don't need to spam my local keys in order to do that. That which may, by the way, affect my local client system if I started spamming all of these keys. You know, Control Delete's an obvious one. But say, for example, I wanted to use Control and F10, for example. This allows me to have that shortcut key. And again, whether it is that I want to use, for example, the Windows key to be actioned in the local system, as you can see there, or create my own custom one, I really, really like that. Same goes if I'm running Wake-on-LAN devices like NASs, scanners, printers, things like that. I can actually use the KVM device that's connected into the target network, find devices and trigger those Wake-on-LAN devices very, very easily. And finally, if I want to access terminal level access to the KVM, I can do that both in the web browser or, if I choose to, accessing it via that client application there as well. You may also notice, if I bring these side by side, that here we've got the same desktop there being accessed. So for example, yes, we're accessing on the web browser on the left, and on the right-hand side, we are utilizing the client application, so browser on the left. You can see parity between them, pretty darn good. Now, it's very difficult to actually measure local output versus this, because the Comet PoE version does not have HDMI in and out. Unlike the Pro, when we were showing the KVM output on the remote access device and the local, we're able really to do that with ease here because we don't have HDMI in and out to run them side by side. But still, nonetheless, that is still pretty darn fluid, and I'll leave that running there for the rest of this vid. Now, accessories wise, I'm going to bring the camera back on screen because I think this is something interesting. I've got the Fingerbot here. Hopefully you can see it here on camera right now. This bit of paper I've got on the bottom, by the way, so I can maintain the integrity of the sticker because I've got another video in mind. But here is the so-called finger, or the Fingerbot. We've got that there. And it really is this straightforward. So say my power button requires a press and hold to reboot for, let's say, 5 seconds, or let's say 8 seconds. We can press that, we can action it, and just like that, it's doing it. This is connected via Bluetooth, by the way, to the KVM device, which is here in the studio, but it would allow me to action it. This is an optional purchase, by the way, and you can change the veracity of that button press as well as the depth of it, but you will need to attach it. This sticky stuff, by the way, is insane. Good luck getting it off. That's why I left that there on there, but it's still nice to have that option. Now, virtual media. We talked about this in the Comet Pro video, and it was a massive area of criticism that Gl.iNet took on the initial Comet KVM device, and that was that it only had 8 gig of memory, 8 gig of storage, and that it only achieved around 8 to 10 megabytes per second. Now, they have addressed that in this, as mentioned before. They've upgraded it to 32 gig and used faster eMMC storage. It's still not insane. They say it hits a peak of 32 megabytes per second, which is still not fabulous, but if you look at most of these compact devices and the state of eMMC, that's not out of this realm. So for example, if we want to, we can go ahead and click upload there. Here's some Taylor Swift songs here. I will get to in a moment, but for example, you can't select multiple files. That's really annoying. But for example, if I select that one there, it says it already exists because I've already uploaded that file. That was dumb of me. Let's just select another one. And it just uploads it here. Now, another thing you might want to do, and we will come back to the better use of this, but right now what that allows me to do is create remote access storage for file sharing. Go click to remote mount, file sharing, remove that there, and then on the connected remote access device, I can go in to the PC. From there, go into the PC settings, drag that across there, open it up. Oh no, I've gone for the wrong one. It's that one underneath there. And as you can see, there is our files. I will say it did get a bit blurry there, didn't it? I'm wondering why that blur took place. Perhaps it was during the upload, but still nonetheless, there are our files, which if we wish, we can double click. I'm obviously not going to play these on YouTube, but still nonetheless, we're able to remote mount storage, but it still is only 32 gigabytes. Also, we weren't able to really ascertain the performance there. So next thing we're going to do is come out of that, and this time we are going to upload something a little bit more useful. We're going to go to downloads, we're going to look up ISOs. From there, we're going to upload an Ubuntu ISO. So let's zoom in there. So again, we're already seeing performance numbers greater than that 8 to 10 megabytes per second at the previous one, and that was even getting lower for some people's reviews. Again, this is one big blocky sequential bit of data there in the form of an ISO, so it's worth keeping that in mind at the very least, but that is still a performance improvement. It's not fabulous, I'll be straight with you, and it's still not a huge amount of storage, but it's better to have this than nothing. And this, of course, allows me, if I choose to mount that when it's done as an available ISO. And if I reboot the system and go into BIOS, it will get picked up. We've already covered that in the previous video, so I'm not going to bore you with it. Hopefully in this video we've included some of that. But that's really as straightforward as that, and we can leave that to upload there in the background as we carry on. I would say in terms of performance, you are looking at an average of around 18 to 22 megabytes per second. It keeps fluctuating between these two numbers. Now, I don't know the perfect hit point for file size where I could achieve that 32 megabytes per second. So yes, this is an improvement over the 8 gig and 8 to 10 megabytes per second performance of the predecessor, but still this isn't earth-shattering performance by any means. Help will also allow you to export logs easily directly onto your system, your client system that you are accessing. What that means, if you download that log, if we go back into the log there, it allows us to download, I'm not going to open these, a lot of the connected activity and identity of what's happened on this system, as well as some of the internal logs as well of what is going on. That's quite a neat little extra feature to have. This is the sort of stuff that if I had problem accessing the KVM device, I wish I could access this without going through the KVM, because that's kind of a catch-22 situation. So I wish there was a way for me to have perhaps a Gl.iNet account where I could access information like this remotely to troubleshoot if I've got issues accessing a KVM connected device remotely from the other side of the world, but at least I've got that option there. And as we've discussed already, and as you can see on screen right now, once you have an ISO already loaded in and you mount it, when your system boots up there, you're able to go in and just simply initialize a system remotely over KVM at the BIOS level, utilizing this device to freshly set up a device. Now, I've utilized the Comet Pro when I was reviewing that Minisforum MSS1 Max. It allowed us to not only overview the software, but also allowed us to initialize the device with NAS software. It was that straightforward and responsive. It's one of the main reasons why I'm probably going to continue using that Comet Pro when it comes to testing a lot of the DIY NAS solutions coming up soon. This one, I would argue, isn't quite as versatile. The Comet Pro doesn't have, the Comet PoE doesn't have the wireless connectivity, doesn't have HDMI in and out. And although it serves as a very good upgrade over that of the PoE, the non-PoE version that came before it, I do still think if you've got the choice, maybe go for the Comet Pro, or at least hold out for the Comet Pro. But let's head back into the studio and summarize and finalize today's review. Bottom line, I appreciate that Gl.iNet went to the trouble of creating a PoE version of this when everyone criticised them for not having it in the first place. They could have just slammed on PoE and changed nothing about the hardware architecture, and they didn't do that. They scaled in, they redesigned, and they improved several elements of the internal hardware. It still lacks some hardcore features that I'd like to see, some of which are of course addressed in the Comet Pro. Again, crowdfunding though. Bottom line, this as an upgrade does make sense, and I do know there is utility for something like this out there, especially when you compare it over that of the original Comet. There is nothing that the original Comet provides that the Comet PoE doesn't improve upon in spades. It's really just a question right now for me, if you like the software and what you've seen, whether it is you should hold out for the Comet Pro or you should go for the PoE, which arguably is going to have a lower power consumption, lower heat generation and lower footprint, but at the same time lacks some of the modern utility of the Comet Pro overall. I like it, but releasing these at the same time, I would argue one is certainly going to draw a lot more attention than the other. A solid product, but perhaps a product that people would have liked to have seen about 6 months ago. Still good, but perhaps maybe give this a glance. But there you go. That is the Comet PoE. Sorry about the rushy nature of this video, largely because we are working on a follow-up on this one, and right now some of the tests that we've been running I didn't want to duplicate for this. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments. Did you buy the original Comet? Did you really enjoy it? Did you find the lack of PoE be a deal breaker for you? What would you like to see in your perfect KVM? We'll of course be comparing some of the currently available KVM devices in the market very, very soon. And apart from that, thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in getting hold of one of the devices we've talked about today, there are links in the description that are affiliated, that if you found this video helpful and if you want to support what we do, using those links results in a small commission that allows me and Eddie to keep doing what we do, and you get to support a creator in the least friction-filled and the way possible that costs you not a dime, not a cent, nothing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.